for the Ark, asshole.
Who's on the Ark?
Welcome to Ludlow. Woo! That's all I got, thanks.
That's true.
The bustling metropolis. This was, believe it or not, a rail hub of the East Mojave Desert. You have 3 railroads here. The Santa Fe, who just gave us a fine demonstration arranged by the head abbot. Thank you, Mark, for arranging that. And then we also had the Ludlow and Southern Railroad, which you're going to hear about a little bit later, which headed south, Ludlow and Southern, that's south. That served the Bagdad-Chase mine. Then you also had my favorite, oh, there's Mark right there. The Tonopah and Tidewater Railroad, which headed north, unless you were coming the other way, in which case it was heading south. So our talk, this brief talk, will be about the a little bit on the TNT and how it related to Ludlow. The Tonopah and Tidewater, you know, most of you have heard of Francis Marion Borax Smith. He's the guy that, well, he had a lot to do with borax, you see. And his mines over near Calico at Borate, which was the topic of Brian Nash's, one of Brian Nash's trips when he was head abbot. The mines at Borate were starting to give out, the mines near Calico. He had a small railroad that connected his mines down to the railroad at Daggett there, and he had some experience with that, and he found that there were quite a few claims up in the eastern part of Death Valley, just to the north of and the west of Death Valley Junction. One of these was Ryan, and then another one would be called New Ryan. His problem was how am I going to get all that borax to the closest railroad, which was at that point when he was first thinking this out, it was the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad, which later became the Union Pacific. That was the closest to him at that particular time. And so, over a snifter of brandy, if you will, up in San Francisco, Smith made a deal with Clark, who owned the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad. And they said, hey, you know what? Clark says you're wanting to bring some your borax down from the Death Valley country. Why don't you link up with the SPLA and SL right there in Las Vegas? It's only about 110 miles. Should be easy to go. So Smith said, hey, that's a great idea. The problem he had was that his board of directors thought that's not going to work money-wise because railroads are very expensive. So Smith said, okay, well, we'll put in a traction road instead. We got a couple of traction engines, steam traction engines over at Borate, so we'll bring those over. Now he knew this wasn't going to work, but he had to demonstrate that it wasn't going to work before the board of directors would sign on to do a railroad. And so he graded out the road for the steam traction engines, knowing that that was eventually going to become a railroad bed. So he grades it out, and on the first trip out, these things crap out. And there he goes to his board of directors and says, you know, the steam traction engines are just not reliable. It just broke down a few miles out of Death Valley Junction. What are we going to do? Oh, well, we can put in a railroad. All right, so now he's got what he wants because he knows railroads and he knows that railroads are reliable. So he says, all right, we've got our deal with Clark. We'll start grading, we'll start building. And he sends his crews up to Vegas. Well, when he gets his guys up to Vegas to start building those railroads, the railroad men for the SPLA and SL say, you're not laying track here. He goes, what do you mean? We have orders not to let you lay track and cross and join into our... Well, Senator Clark said it was okay. Well, Senator Clark's out of the country. He's in Paris. And this is 1905, so you're not just going to call him up and say, hey, what the hell's going on? You know, you got to send a cable, all that kind of stuff. Nobody can find him. He's in some whorehouse somewhere. I don't know where he is. Finally, he gets the idea, okay, this isn't going to work. So he decides that what he's going to do instead is redirect the railroad south, and he makes a deal with the Santa Fe. These tracks right here. He says, well, the only town through which the Santa Fe goes, that's anywhere near where he needs to have his ore brought to, is here at Ludlow. Now, it's a significantly longer trip now. It was going to be 110 miles. Now it's going to be 170 miles up to the mines up there in the Death Valley country. But it's the only thing he's got. So in 1905, by August, they've made the deal with the Santa Fe. By November of 1905, they're already laying rail here. And he decided that this being the only real spot of civilization that's accessible in any way by rail that already exists. This would be the base of operations for the Tonopah Tidewater. Now, how come it's called Tonopah Tidewater? Well, everybody has these grandiose ideas, loathsome delusions of grandeur, if you will. And so he figured, oh, well, it'll sound great if we're going to extend all the way from Tonopah, Nevada, all the way to the Tidewater at San Diego. Well, it reached neither of those spots. Instead, it really kind of made it up towards Beatty there at Rhyolite, and it terminated right here when it was finally finished.
Well, yeah, one thing when you walk around here, the Tonopah Tidewater, I counted 16 locomotives on their inventory. So this is where they maintained all the locomotives. So there was an actual engine house. Pictures of the engine house are huge. They could park several locomotives in there. And like you said, you had the boiler shop, the paint shop, several shops, several tracks in there, and then there was a series of bunkhouses over here for the workers and some of the railroad operators and stuff. And you can watch, if you get on Google Earth, it's as plain as day. It's pretty cool. You can follow all the, matter of fact, like you said, you can follow all the track all the way to Beatty, but you can see all the track stuff here. And then one more thing, because this is a good spot, I want to introduce my Tuscan celebrity on this trip, Scott. The guy in the green shirt right here, he owns about 4,000 acres of mine claims, and that's what we're going to be on today, from about the Red Dog mine 4 miles out all the way to Bagdad-Chase. He's got the claims. He's the one who's getting us into the mines today. Otherwise, we were not getting into the mines. And he's got a red dog.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's the brother in.
How about Dr. Sid Plumner? Sir.
Okay, well,
Listen up!
Quiet!
unfortunately for you guys, I get to talk 3 times. So before I was building the ark with Noah, I was here. This was the 3rd stop on the polar bears. The polar bears were the predecessors to the Vituscans, and you'll hear that at Bagdad-Chase. So we came and looked over these shops. Then we went out across the Broadwell Dry Lake, and those telegraph poles, there were still some there with the original insulator types. And we went all the way up to Crucero, and from there we went off to Epton Canyon. But there was the deal here was that store that you passed was still standing. You could read it. It was something Brothers. Yeah, Murphy Brothers store. And then when we talk about the Ragtown plaque, we camped here, and we'll talk about that. But this was the 3rd stop, and we, as Paul was saying, we went up Broadwell, and there we saw the insulators. There was, and the other thing was that the train ran till 39, like he was saying. And then in World War II, they tore up all the rails. So there was a Platrix guy, his name was Hugh Tolford, who bought up all the china that he could get his hands on and the artifacts. And I saw the plates and cups from the Tonopah. So in Baker, we stumbled on, it's no longer there, we stumbled on an original boxcar, which had Tonopah Tidewater on it in somebody's backyard. That's it. Thank you.
Guys, listen up. I'm going to introduce somebody here that knows about this spot. But the reason we stopped here,
but he couldn't be
this
here.
is a centerpiece of 2 places that we're going to stop. There's a real-life murder mystery that this is involved in, and I watched, there's like a 1-hour documentary on TV that you can watch about what happened here. So this was the Red Dog Mine office. We're going to stop at the Red Dog Mine, and we're going to talk about the disappearance of April Pitzer, and who's never been found.